Hey there, I'm Greg Nicotero.
Hi, my name is Coleman Domingo.
Hi, I'm Benai Garcia.
Hi, I am Mo Collins.
Hi, I'm Chad L. Coleman, Tyrese from The Walking Dead, and Cuddy from The Wire, and you are listening to the Cinik Radio Podcast. Here are your hosts, Cinik, Igrihe, and Ryan.
And welcome to episode 110 of the Cinik Radio Podcast. And I'm your host in the fanny pack of podcasting, Cinik. And with me as always, my co-host and the people behind the Edmund Tully for King movement, Igrihe, Ryan, and Kim. And we're here this week to review the series finale of Game of Thrones, entitled The Iron Throne. This epic saga might be over, but if you like what you hear, don't forget to smash that like button and smash that subscribe button as well for all the latest happenings in geek culture every week here on the Cinik Radio Podcast. 8 seasons and 73 episodes later, Game of Thrones now draws to a close. The once beloved show, in all its brutal glory, has become one of the most polarizing topics on the internet, with the majority of the fan base swaying towards nays. Let's talk about it. Kim, you are our resident eagle eye when it comes to changes in the opening. Were you surprised that even though it's as impressive as it is, King's Landing being built during the opening montage, that changes weren't made to represent its current state in the last episode?
There were a few subtle changes, but I was really kind of expecting to see it completely obliterated and torn down. Maybe with the Lannister crest being taken down behind the throne and it still being up. I thought that was a little bit disappointing, but I guess there being so many spoilers and whatnot out on the internet, and so many theories that were being tossed around, it kind of set the tone for me, at least, for what was coming up.
Yeah, I agree with you there. IG, what do you think? Would you have preferred to see just a heaping mass of King's Landing just smoking?
I think with everything else they were showing in the opening and the changes each week that they were doing this season especially, I think it was almost deserved that they needed to have it at least partially torn down, at least the Red Keep portion of it, but really more all of King's Landing should have been shown to be on fire or something. I think it was a missed opportunity in a show that realistically was really well done for a series finale and for an episode of Game of Thrones. I really did like this episode, but I think they really needed to do that, especially how much attention they were drawing to everything they were doing with like the White Walker movement and everything else going on. And even like when they showed all the funeral pyres when that episode was going on, it just really was something that deserved to be done with as much attention as everybody was spouting about it, because even the creators themselves were talking about what they were doing this season with the opening montage.
Yeah, coffee cups and water bottles aside, what made this show special was its attention to detail. And then even though the last season hasn't really kind of lived up to that, I loved the changes in the beginning of the show, because back when we were kids, the show opening, even if people left, remained the same for the length of the show. They never really changed it. The only show I could really think of that would change it on a weekly basis was The Simpsons, and I think they kind of started it all. Ryan, the episode opens with Tyrion and Jon kind of wandering through the wreckage that was King's Landing, which in my opinion was perfectly done. Tyrion really seems to be taking it hard. Do you think he was feeling guilty, remorse, disgust? It didn't look like much of a victory parade, now did it?
Yeah, no, I think it's all of the above, and I think he played it really well, and I think that scene was really immersive. Like, I think as a viewer, I really felt like I was in his shoes and kind of experiencing the shock. You know, even the way it was shot, the music was not quite there. It was almost as if you were experiencing that in a daze. You know, he's definitely seemed like, you know, any combination of things. I think, you know, he got it wrong again. And so he's definitely responsible, but also considering, you know, he can't do this anymore and she needs to be stopped. And I think you can see a flood of emotions, you know, in addition to wanting to salvage at least something that maybe Jaime and Cersei got away. And that initially he held on to that, maybe that one hope that in spite of all this, maybe, you know, at least one thing went well.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Kim. I mean, he's really taking it hard in those scenes, and he's dirty and sweaty and dust covered and defeated. But is Tyrion really to blame? He did everything he possibly could to prevent this from happening, right?
I feel like he did everything that he possibly could. He was loyal when he's kind of flip-flopped before in the past on what he wanted to do, who he was going to be loyal to. I just feel like he did what he needed to do. When the time came and push came to shove, he always tried to do what he felt was right. I think one of the things that was also really interesting when he was walking into and seeing just the wreckage everywhere in that opening sequence is how they kind of did it from the point of view, like right over his shoulder, and you're seeing it from like his eye level. And I hate making it out to sound like it's a short joke or anything like that, but you notice that what he was focusing on was kids. And he turned and he saw a skeleton charred in a window. He saw the little girl that was holding the horse that Arya had tried to help in the episode just before that. And it was like, for me, that was kind of his reckoning with humanity, that he's completely down to earth now. All of his ego and his eccentricities are gone now, and he's on earth. He is seeing it, he is feeling it, and whatever it is that he felt like he was higher up and working towards in the past is gone now, and he's seeing everything in a new light.
Yeah, all of his delusions of grandeur of this savior that Daenerys was supposed to be is completely gone. And it reminded me a lot of the way they shot the Arya sequence last episode. You know, it was very much like that, except it was in much, much more slow motion. And I love the Irish guy that spent way too much time out in the sun wandering through the town trying to get out as well. And the fact that nobody made a move to help him. You have no idea who he was or why he was there or how he got burned, but he just kind of wandered out and they all just let him go. Don't get him a medic or a maester or anything. Just let him go. It's fine. IG, the party happens upon Grey Worm, who's executing prisoners. Jon tries to intervene. Forget Clip Game Bowl. Forget Jaime versus Euron. Would you have liked to see a showdown between Grey Worm and Jon Snow?
While I think on paper it might be fun to see, in reality, I think Grey Worm would hand him his ass. I know that Jon has fought at Hardhome in the Battle of the Bastards and everything, but it's like putting you or I up against Ryan George, because he's trained all the time to fight, and we like to watch fighting. So just because we can watch it and understand what, certain takedowns and things are and how they might work, he, even smaller than us, is going to kick our royal asses quickly. And that's exactly what's going to happen, because all Grey Worm has done his whole life is be a warrior. Jon has had to do other things and live other ways. It's not his only existence. So it would be fun, but I think it would have ended poorly for poor Jon Snow.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Grey Worm is a straight up killer. Jon's a good soldier, but Grey Worm is a killer. And what I would do is, if I was going to fight Ryan George, I'd tell him the fight happens at between 5 and 5:02, knowing that he's probably going to be late to it. And at 5:02, I would just declare myself the victor and walk off into the distance with my arms raised in the air. How about you, Kim? Would you have liked to see a fight between Grey Worm and Jon Snow? And how do you think that would have ended up?
No, that's not something I would have been interested in. It's one of those things, like you guys were saying, you kind of know how it's going to end. You saw it almost for that split second in the last episode when the battle was going on at King's Landing. Grey Worm turns around and he shoots that look to Jon for trying to stop people from his military from proceeding and continuing to kill. Like, he could screw him up. Like, he could royally ruin him. Jon doesn't have that in him. Like, he didn't even want to kill anybody in the actual war. And the only reason why he even started fighting again was because people were attacking him personally. They were coming directly at him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have done it.
I kind of liked how Grey Worm dramatically cut the next guy's throat, too, like to really show me meant business. Like, yeah, he put everything he had into it. I don't think in the history of man, any guy's throat has ever been cut like that guy's, because Grey Worm just put everything into it. Tyrion was offered an armed escort by Jon, which he promptly turns down. Kim, was it so he could go wallow in his own failure, or because of where he was headed?
I think it's because he's been here before. He knew where he was getting ready to walk into. I think he needed to have that last moment of solace. This is his entire family lineage that was there. He knew that he was walking in and that he was going to say goodbye to his best friend for the last time. He knew that his sister was going to be gone. You could almost tell the look on his face. He's such a tremendous actor. He deserves so much credit because he could not say a frickin' word and he can just act out an entire scene with his facial expressions. And I think he knew that he was getting ready to walk in and what he was going to witness was going to change the course of who he is and what his future becomes. And I think he needed to do that on his own.
Yeah, there was definitely no celebration. I mean, he didn't rip off his shirt and have the t-shirt, now the tallest Lannister. He was definitely hurting. You could see it in every movement. You could see it in every step. When he picked up that rock and started banging on the other rocks, it broke my heart to watch that happen to him. You felt like this was a real guy and he was going through real emotions. Ryan, as convenient as Tyrion knowing exactly where his siblings' bodies might be, the scene was painfully beautiful as he mourns his brother and sister. Now, when you have a show like this, like Game of Thrones, with a large ensemble cast, 99% of the actors will disappear into amenity or guest appearances on other shows. Do you think this is the last we've seen of Peter Dinklage?
I don't think it's the last we've seen of him, but I think, like we do often get, I don't know that he'll ever get a role that's this size. I don't know that any of the main cast will ever be in a role that's as large as this. I hope they do. And I think that no matter whether you loved or hated the season, I think we all can agree the score has been phenomenal, the visuals have been amazing, and the acting has been great. And so, hopefully they all deserve big jobs, and I hope that they get it. But I think, unfortunately, it becomes a situation where he's almost typecast, and I think it's not just him, but for a lot of people. I hope I'm wrong, and especially Peter Dinklage. He's in such a unique position, kind of being a little person, but who's kind of transcended that, and that we see him as unfairly, to other actors of that stature, that they're kind of defined by their height, and he's been able to kind of transcend that. So I think if anybody, he can get better roles, and maybe he is in a position to get specific roles that other people can't get. So, I hope we see him more often. I hope we see him in huge roles, but it's going to be tough for really, like I said, most of the main cast. The
first time that Warwick Davis saw Peter Dinklage, he knew he was screwed. Like, he's never going to get a role outside of costume again. I've seen him in other things. I mean, in the beginning of his career, he was on Nip Tuck. He's been in the X-Men movies. He was in 3 Billboards, which he was amazing at. But this role, there was something special about it, like it was written directly for him. What do you think, IG?
I think that's really the point. When they were looking at someone to come in and play Tyrion Lannister, apparently it was said that they didn't want anyone other than Peter Dinklage. He was the one and the only choice to come and do it, and thank goodness they got him. And looking back now, if I tried to put anybody else in this role, even if they tried to do it with CGI or something and put another actor in there like they did with things in The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings trilogy, they couldn't make it work as good as they did, because the acting itself is so strong from Peter Dinklage. The man is a master of his craft, and I'm saddened to see these episodes end, because it was so great to watch all of it. But I'm hoping he's going to be able to do other things. And I have seen him in other projects. I mean, even going back and seen him in Elf, he was funny in that, and he's got chops across more than just dramatic roles. So the options are endless for him, but this was so big. The magnitude of this was so large that recreating this in any other form outside of another large HBO series with something this enigmatic is going to be next to impossible.
We finally get to see Daenerys as her troops assemble, but her victory speech seemed more Emperor-esque, as it didn't feel like she was a liberator, but more of a conqueror. IG, do you think the speech came across as a little more powerful because she kept switching between Dothraki and Valyrian rather than just speaking it in common?
I think that did give it some air of gravitas, but the biggest problem is anybody there that doesn't speak Dothraki and Valyrian had no idea what she was saying, and it still sounded pretty angry. I think Tyrion even said, does that sound like somebody who's done fighting? And no, she seemed like the way she was saying things is like, well, let's go over to the next place. Let's go over to Dorne and burn them up for a while, and then let's go over to Casterly Rock and burn up them for a while, and all 7 kingdoms, and let's show them my dragon, and when they come out waving their white flags, we'll burn up most of them and let 5 or 6 live, and I'll be able to rule 27 people. It really seemed like she was ready to just burn it all, Mad King style.
Yeah, she wasn't interested in breaking the wheel, but the whole car. Kim, what did you think of the speech? And did she sound more like a liberator or a conqueror to you? And how far would this have gone if somebody didn't put a stop to it?
It actually gave me a flashback to college history class, and you're watching, like, they're wheeling in the TV on the cart, and you get to watch a bit of History Channel or whatever. To me, it reminded me of Hitler giving a speech to Germany in the 30s, before World War II, before he invaded his own country, before he invaded Poland. It was her standing up there, this blonde hair, blue eyed dictator in front of all of these people, and all of them are standing perfectly in unison. And it was a striking resemblance of that to me. And if she wasn't stopped, it would never stop. She needed to be killed. This was it for her. And I think in a lot of ways, she may have known that this was going to happen. She had that vision previously. Quite frankly, I thought when Tyrion started to walk up to her, I thought, oh crap, is he going to pull a knife on her or something and just say to hell with it? I'm ready to go now. This is my duty. And I'm glad it ended the way it did, though, with her and John.
She's going to walk up and stab her right in the mid-calf.
I'm going to get you with the Achilles.
He's killing her softly right to the mid-calf. Ryan, I know that you kind of probably shook your head at this because I'm now simpatico when it comes to watching these shows. The Long Night, they lost apparently half of the Dothraki and half of the Unsullied. Did it seem like there was an awful lot of troops still standing there in uniform?
If they would have explained that, like, they're sending out half the Dothraki and then the other half are waiting somewhere else, or they sent them south to prepare for whatever, it would have been nice for a line, because it seemed kind of shocking that, 3 episodes ago we thought that they had basically extinguished an entire race of people, and all of a sudden there are a bunch of them just hanging out there. I'm a little more understanding of the Unsullied because they were kind of, they were spread out a little bit more. There's a lot more of them. They're much more they're better trained soldiers. You could see in their formations and how they were structured that they were actually trying to, they were there to help them get back into the castle. So I'm able to give a little bit on that, but it just seemed like, where did all these Dothraki horses come from? That doesn't make any sense. So yeah, I was a little surprised by that.
I freed my brother and you slaughtered a city. Tyrion not only showed that he has brains, but a huge set of balls on him as he takes off his pin and tosses it down the stairs in front of everybody. Kim, did you think that was wraps for good old Tyrion? Did you think he was going to be Drogon food right then and there? Was there even a little bit of his disapproval that fazed Dany at all in the least?
Honestly, I thought when he did that was going to be it. He was just going to be kibble. She gave him a look like 99% just evil, shooting lasers basically right through him. But then there was like this one little piece of her that instead of making a loud announcement, she could have called in 1 million men, however many were there, to take him down. She could have had any number of people kill him right there as a display to further her vision of how powerful she is. She could have done that. She chose not to. She said it quietly. Arrest him, take him away. I think maybe that's because she maybe still was hoping that he would come around. Maybe she still had one shred of feeling left, or maybe that was all that she had left to give for him. That was like her last mode of sympathy, because she could have been Char.
I think he almost expected it too. I mean, it wouldn't have took much for her to just call in Operation Pincushion and have the Unsullied come and just air condition the whole lot of them, and she didn't. So that, I think that spoke to how much she still really did kind of care about him, regardless about how he thought of her actions. He should be dead. Anybody else in the kingdom that did that, if Jon Snow did that, I have a feeling that they would have killed him right there on the spot. But I do think there was some sort of fondness between the two of them, or at least she still carried something for him, that his loyalty kept him alive in that situation. It's a terrible thing I'm asking, but it's the right thing. Jon goes to see Tyrion, and the former hand is clear. Only Jon can stop the situation now before it gets any worse. I've never been a huge fan of Kit Harington's acting before, but him and Peter both knocked it out of the park in this scene. Ryan, do it for you? No. Do it for the world? No. The Hail Mary toss. What about your sisters? Do it for them. If Tyrion didn't play that card, do you think Jon would have kept dancing right along to that She's My Queen tune?
I kind of hope not. I'm kind of torn. I feel like he was never quite sure that he was going to do that until the last moment. I think it more had to do with love is the death of duty, duty is the death of love kind of comments. And I think that the sisters, maybe that pushed him over. But I'd like to think that's not it, because then it says something about his character. Yeah, I guess that he was only doing it for his family and not because she was a tyrant or becoming a tyrant. So kind of torn there. And like I said, I think he was teetering And that maybe is what pushed him over. But I feel like he eventually would have made that decision because it was just, it was the thing he had to do. It was his duty. I think it was more that exchange. I think that really is what kind of pushed him. And then, again, that Sansa and Arya is what kind of cemented it, for him.
No, I think quite honestly that it was the sister line. That got him because he was, through all of his own actions, totally sold on the fact that she should be queen. And as much as he didn't want to be king, he was there to support her. But he's still loyal to his family because, you know what? Maybe his brothers didn't treat him all that great. But Arya, specifically Arya, was always great to Jon. And I think, when you say sisters, that includes Arya. So as much as Sansa is respected and, taking the seat of power in Winterfell, Arya is the key to turning Jon's mind somewhere. So when you say his sisters, that's going to spark Arya into his head. So, yeah, as much as I'd like to believe that Jon would have done the right thing either way, I think that without that little bit of push about his sisters, he wouldn't have done anything else. He would have stood by the company line, and this is our queen.
And actually, to kind of reinforce your point, it does kind of echo season 1 where Ned makes the decision to, he decides to admit to treason to save Sansa. There is that similarity. So in that way, I guess it would make sense that he would have made that decision regardless. But in a show where they do have a lot of callbacks and echo things from previous seasons, that certainly is one of them.
Wasn't it right before they fought the White Walkers that Arya and Jon had that moment out at the tree, and she's like, we're family, never forget that. When Tyrion mentioned, would your sisters bend a knee for her? If you don't do it for yourself, do it for them. That specific moment is what that made me think back to, because I think he had, for just a brief moment in time, maybe forgotten that, and he forgot what was more important, who he should be loyal to. The queen or his family. And he thought back to Arya saying, we're family, don't forget it. And all of a sudden he's like, crap, you're right.
IG, Jon and Daenerys have a heart-to-sword talk about the future and mercy. And the queen's reasoning seemed less and less like she just lost it last week during the battle, and more like, this is the only path to victory, so I took it. What do you think?
I think that she had really deep thoughts about breaking the wheel and taking her seat through fire and blood. So she took it through fire and blood. And this has been foretold. Everybody that's mad at Daenerys for this turn, there's no turn. Like I said in last week's episode, every single season she's burned people. Even when the dragons were teeny tiny, she was burning people. And before the dragons were burned, she burned them in a fire with all the Dothraki watching. This is normal behavior. She just gained more power and bigger dragons. So the ability to burn things became easier. This was bound to happen. Anybody that saw this happening differently wasn't watching the same show, or they were just deluded in how they thought this was going to go. There was no way that we weren't going to have this turn. That being said, when we get into that room and Jon just keeps talking to her about we have to have a world of mercy, and she's so adamant about, oh, it will be mercy because, maybe she thinks if you burn really fastly, that's better than burning slowly. So maybe she thinks they're all going to burn anyway. I don't know what her thought is, but it's certainly not merciful.
Well, Ryan, we spent all week talking about Mad Queen and Mental Break, and maybe she just needed to go take a vacation, and she sounded very coherent about this is the way that this needed to go in order for me to win. Did she not?
And this is one of the areas where I actually love this part of the episode, this first half, and when I recap it, I'll kind of give a little bit more of context, but I'm torn because I love the way this went down in a lot of ways, and it was really beautifully done, but we lose a lot of context. So whether and it's hard to do this on TV anyway. Kind of in a book from a POV chapters, we can see how that descent, and maybe it's a little smoother and it's not as kind of jarring, but she definitely seemed very coherent she wasn't crazy. And she'd kind of gone off the deep end. And so I think it was a little shocking to see her go from where she was before to this, because this was like full on heel turn. Last week it was awful, but you can kind of blame it on the emotions of losing everything, and then John, and then the bells, and she just freaks, and then maybe she ends up remorseful. But between the Hitler speech, and which was amazingly done, and I love that they did use the other languages because it made it that much more impactful. But between that and then her talking to John, as it was just like she didn't even realize how awful she sounded. She just played it perfectly. But yeah, at that point you realize, okay, she's full heel turn. She's gone off the deep end. Like, something's got to be done about her.
Kim, knowing Jon Snow like we've come to know him over the last seasons, and putting yourself in his boots, if she showed any remorse, if she did anything, do you think there was a way that she could stop this from happening? Much like we said last week, maybe he could have stopped her from going off the deep end? That
whole moment when she's sitting there and she's basically pleading her case to him. She's basically looking up to him and she's like, can't you see the big picture? She's trying to illustrate this big idea that she's got in her head, and he's like, but how do you even know that this is going to be a thing? Like, how would you even think that this could be possible, and why would you want to approach it this way? And then she just keeps talking, and her story becomes more insane as she's talking about, I'm going to go here and there, and we're going to kill all these people, basically. And I think the more he hears it, the less he becomes attached to her. He's disassociating himself with her because he's realizing, holy crap, I've been following this woman who has been following basically what everybody's been telling her this whole time. Be the dragon. You are the dragon. Be a dragon. And now she's the frickin' dragon, and she's crazy. And he's like, I love you. I've always loved you. You are my queen. But he had to make that decision right then and there that his family, his sisters, meant more to him than his loyalty to her. And that was hard for him because I think he really did love her, even though I think the chemistry between the two of them wasn't always like fabulous. They acted the hell out of that part. They really did do a good job with it.
They really did. I mean, Kit did a great job this episode. So did Amelia. So did Peter. I mean, I know that this was probably filmed earlier than The Long Night because I think The Long Night was the last thing they did during the season. But they knew this was the last we were going to see those characters. And like IG likes to say, it was the last game of the season, and they held nothing back. Ryan, Drogon was really not pleased about his mother's death, and he Dracarys'd all over the Iron Throne. What did you think of that visually?
Everything they did with Drogon this episode was stunning. There were some amazing shots of Drogon, and also just he looked the best. Like that they were able to render him digitally. I don't know the technical stuff, but it looked really good. Like they did a really, really good job with Drogon, far better than I think I've seen at all on the show. That was the one thing I didn't quite get. Like, why did he burn the throne? I get symbolically why. Is it that he's more intelligent than we're led to believe, and that he kind of knew the meaning of the throne and burned it down? Was it that he just, because of John's kind of relation to him, he couldn't burn him, so he just turned and spewed flames? Like, it was a little weird. Like, why do it? Why burn the throne? Just took me out of it slightly, because clearly what he's burning and what it means symbolically. And in a way, in a way it works kind of poetically. Like Daenerys broke the wheel. That's the wheel, and by her death causes the throne to be to be no more. So I don't know. I'm mixed on that, but I thought it was done beautifully, and just the way Drogon kind of pushing her, realizing she's dead, and the cries. I think everything about that scene until he kind of turns and does the throne is really well done, and even that is still well done. It's just kind of a little off-putting, but otherwise, like again, everything about up until that point. Everything about this episode is a 10 for me. To that point, I just loved the way they went about setting the stage and kind of the aftermath. Leading to that point, everything was really great.
Going by D&D lore, dragons are supposed to be extremely, almost genius level intelligence and extremely petty. So I think Drogon, in so many words, was saying if mom doesn't get to sit there, nobody does. And that's breaking the wheel to the 10th degree. Now, I had a great idea while I was writing the questions, but I got into it a little bit late. So, Kim, I'm going to hit you with this. Tracy Coakley from Dublin, Ohio wants to know, do you think there's more dragons out there? And where do you think he took Daenerys' body?
So I've been thinking about that too, because there's a couple of different places that he could go. I was looking online and I was trying to find the map of, the countries and all the cities and what territory is where now. And I think he's heading south. I think he's heading east of Essos. I think he's heading in that general direction, like southeast. There's a lot that's left to be explored. And yes, I had the theory earlier in this season that there's still a water dragon that's left to be explored. That's a whole nother avenue that could come at some point in time. And are there other eggs out there? And is there any possibility that Dany isn't dead? We see her lifeless. We assume she's lifeless, but we're also talking about a fantasy world where frickin' dragons and witches are a legit thing. So is it possible that there's a way that she could come back and have access to other dragon eggs? Who knows?
I hope was two things. One is the chances of us getting a Dream of Spring are so low that I don't think we'll ever get to the point that we'll know if she survived this or not. But I hope that George R. R. Martin has it written into his will that HBO cannot do anything, post this. Like, I think it's a fitting end. I mean, I'm fairly certain that this is mostly the way that the books are going to end. Obviously, that we'll get there a different way, but I think it's a fitting end. Like, that's it, and I hope that they don't try to add to that.
Tyrion is brought before a council of the great houses of Westeros in the Dragon Pit, and they've decided to calm Grey Worm down by picking a new king or queen. Eugene, what was the more misguided move? Edwin Tully standing up and campaigning for the job, or Sam's idea that, hey, maybe we should turn this into a democracy and vote for a new king?
Well, Tully's idea to stand up and kind of basically put himself out there for bid, while stupid, if you want to rule, you can't get it if you don't ask, right? So
closed mouth don't get fed.
That's right. You speak up. You might get the job just by saying, well, nobody else wants it, I'll take it. But these are a bunch of people that are used to this is how things are done, right? The lords and ladies of the houses of Westeros make decisions about everything, usually about their own lands in relation to whoever is sitting on the now iron slag pit. Really, so that makes Sam's idea for trying to go pure democracy and let everybody have a say. Yeah, that ain't going to fly around this circle here, buddy. So at that time, in that aspect, Sam's idea is worse. Now, I think that was just thrown in there as a little bit of fun for us viewers. I don't think that they're going to try and write anything like that. I'm pretty sure George isn't going to have that in his book. Maybe the Edmure thing, but certainly not Sam going, well, what about everyone has a say? It's really, as good-hearted as Sam Tarly is, I don't think he's that dumb. I think he's smarter and he knows where he's at. And maybe they let him be a maester and be lord of his old house because he can go back and be Tarly. He doesn't have to go back to the Night's Watch. So maybe he's allowed to be both. And so maybe he does have a say. And yeah, but democracy is not going to work in this aspect.
There was so many great things happening in that scene, too, from Sansa just completely shutting her much older, much more established uncle down, to them laughing Sam, Robert Arryn becoming an adult and taking the guidance from Royce. I love that scene so much, but one of the things that stood out to me is no matter how badly that Tyrion screws the pooch, he's still the smartest guy in the room. And people still have to listen to him no matter what position he's in. He's dirty. He probably hasn't bathed in months. He's chained. And they're still like, what should we do, Tyrion? And that speaks volumes to how great that character is and how well written he is. Tyrion decides the council will pick a king that will break the wheel, and he chooses Bran. Bran can't have any kids, and that they're going to come together and decide a new king every time one is needed. Now, I'm not sure how that's going to work out logistically. Giving the reasons he laid out, Kim, are you buying or selling on Bran the Broken?
I think it was a really smart move to put somebody in that position who can see or have access to being able to see everything that's going on over such a large area.
Big brother.
I mean, you got to figure if there's going to be anybody that's going to be in charge of something, don't you want them to be able to actually see what's going on 1,000 miles away or be able to get access to the information quickly? I mean,
Isn't that what the CIA does right now?
I mean, yeah, but this isn't exactly...
Not according to some people.
It's not like they have the internet or anything back then. So you can't just do a Google search.
But they do have the internet, except only he has it. Just the one guy.
He's got ravens. You know, he wants to find out what's going on, and he wants to be able to keep his people protected or find out what, is a far corner of the map in danger of something. He can find that out quickly. It's really kind of what you want is somebody who's going to be a leader, is somebody that can offer that kind of protection and that knowledge. I mean, Tyrion was right when he said, Bran the Broken, all the stories, blah, 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 blah. And he gives that whole speech, and I really thought it was fantastic because he's right. And he is smart. He's an intelligent man. And I think it was a smart choice. It's not the one I wanted, but I do think it was wise.
Who would you have chosen?
I was really hoping that it was going to be Jon having that change of heart because he was kind of like the victor. Everybody was rooting for him. You know, he had already been applauded previously for being the king of the North. I was hoping that he was going to take that to another level and succumb to peer pressure, so to speak, and take that throne or that metal blob of old swords.
Like a fat kid with a chocolate cake, there's no sneaking up on Bran. But IG, if not Bran, then who?
I always believed in Sansa, but Sansa doesn't appear to be interested in anything other than the North, which I admire and I commend her for, because she's like, well, the North is going to just remain separate. So this whole title that they've been spewing for all these years, all of a sudden they had to remix it and get something different. Maybe Robin Aaron, I mean, his mom's gone, so he's not on the teat anymore. He long bottomed a little bit and came out looking a little bit better on the back end after a little bit of Royce mentoring. Really, just about anybody sitting there, I'd have been okay with them putting the Onion Knight in at King. Just about anyone sitting in that semicircle right there would have been an okay option, including Bran. And I'm not sure Bran is a poor option. I'm actually pretty happy with it. I might have wanted Jon too, but I actually went into this thinking that both Daenerys and Jon were going to die.
Yeah, I gave it a little too much thought, and Bran does make sense for the purposes of the story that they laid out in front of us. And I wanted Jon too, but who wants somebody that really doesn't want to be there? It's not in Jon's character to rule, and I think it would have been torture for the guy every day going forward. But Ryan, who would you have chose if not Bran?
Bran makes sense. Tyrion is also someone who would have made sense, just given his experience and what he's gone through in his own kind of arc. Sansa as well, but I think Sansa's it seemed like the North was more important to her, so those would be my choices. I think based on the characters that we've gotten to know. But I think Bran is fine. Honestly, I'm glad it wasn't Jon. I think it's not in his character. It would have been the kind of easy way out or the kind of cheap way out, and I'm glad they didn't do that because it's just not what he wanted. It's not who he was. I think he got a fitting ending. It is bittersweet, but he got to be away from all the politics and the BS and the crap. So I'm kind of glad that he, Ghost, and Tormund can kind of ride into the sunset. I don't think it mattered that much. I think at the end of the day, I think that the whole point was that the throne is just this seat for power hungry men and women, and it was had this kind of mesmerizing effect on people where they acted in their own self-interest and murdered and killed thousands just to get it. And this has been going on for hundreds of years. And so, the fact that he just decided, I don't want any of this. I think that was his arc. And the fact that it was given to the person who least wants it, that is, in effect, a way of kind of breaking the wheel. So I think in retrospect, I think Bran makes a lot of sense for the story and the story that I think they were trying to tell.
Well, even if that change came about, even if that makes a difference, then I guess this was all kind of worth it. But the vote from the council is unanimous. And Kim, Barry from Wales, can you believe that we have Wales listening to us, wants to know, was it wise for Bran to let Sansa withdraw from the Seven Kingdoms? And could it have been a slippery slope where other kingdoms like Dorne said, yeah, we don't want to be a part of it either?
There was that brief moment where they kind of cut to Yara. And she was like, that was an option? Like, I didn't know that this was a thing. I totally would have spoke up if I would have even thought about that. But I think that was one of those things that he probably already foresaw. He already knew it. It was his family's land. They've been ruling it for, hundreds of thousand years. And I think he understood that in order to keep the peace, it was okay to let that be protected. You've got Sansa over the north, you've got Jon all the way up at the wall, the Night's Watch, that's just what they've always done. That whole family lineage has been nothing but protecting it, and they've done a good job of it. And they risk their entire lives in order to continue to protect it all the way through the last couple of seasons. They put themselves on the line. So they've proven their worth, that they're loyal to still trying to make some sort of a union out of this with everyone else in the Seven Kingdoms, but that they are worthy of being separate as well. I think that was a good idea.
I think it was too, and you got to consider stuff like that. I mean, Dorne has always had one foot out of the Seven Kingdoms. They're kind of a rebel kingdom on theirself, and I'm not sure why the North wouldn't accept Bran as their king, but I guess we had to get to Queen Sansa somehow. I guess it makes a little bit of sense, but they're right. 6 kingdoms doesn't sound as good as 7. IG, the compromise is to send the Khaleesi Slayer, Jon Snow, back to the Wall and make him part of the Night's Watch. Did you agree with this decision despite his lineage?
Well, the fact is his lineage is really only known to some people. I don't know how much that word has spread. I don't think it would have been the right idea to put him on the throne just because he was kind of right alongside of Daenerys for this whole thing, right? So he's a little bit culpable for King's Landing getting burned because he was with her planning to make these things happen. So he's not the right person to take the throne. But why not send him to the north? I mean, if we think back to when Tormund was going to leave and go back north, he was like, hey, you should come with me. You don't belong down here. You belong up there with us. And maybe he's right. Plus, he gets to go back to Ghost. Why is that not a win?
There was no way Grey Worm was going to leave with Jon Snow being anything less than sentenced to a life sentence or beheaded. They were looking at another war almost immediately, so it makes sense to kind of do that. Kim, Amy Baker from Syracuse wants to know, what's west of Westeros? What do you think's in store going forward for Arya? As a possible spinoff and maybe a crossover with Tony Stark?
Or she runs into Leif Erikson as he's trying to discover a new world. Who knows? I have no idea what's west of there in this dream state, but I could tell you one thing. I thought that it was a little disappointing to see her go from a meek and humble child to no one, to the many-faced girl, to an assassin, and then just nothing. She's just an explorer. She's just a girl. I don't know if it upset me or if it made sense that she was just a girl. She's always been a girl with no name. She's always just been, whatever. And so just to see her kind of sailing off into the sunset, I was a little bit disappointed with that. I guess a part of me was kind of hoping that, after hearing the advice from the Hound, that maybe she would have given Gendry the second thought, and gone back to him. But I don't know what's out there. And I'm hoping that it's part of a spinoff, because I would love to see where that story arc continues.
Now Captain of the Guards, Brienne, finishes Sir Jaime Lannister's page, and we cut to a meeting of the new and improved Small Council. Bronn's now Master of Coin and Lord of Highgarden, and the Master of Lofty Titles, apparently. Davos is Master of Ships, and it looks like Sam might be Grand Maester. Ryan, outside of Tyrion being left out of the book of Songs of Fire and Ice, did we leave Westeros a better place than we found it?
I think so. That second kind of half of the episode, I found myself smiling and kind of like giggling throughout, so it can't be bad. I think it was a bit, some of it was kind of convoluted, including that scene, but I still like the Small Council. They all, see it. I'd love to kind of be a fly on the wall for those sessions. It was enjoyable to see that. I think they did leave Westeros better than, it's better than it was. But you've got to think that in that world, I think things didn't change so much that, and in fact, if and when Bran does die, that creates a power vacuum, and I could see a world where maybe it becomes even more difficult, because now anybody can make a claim. Anyone can try to win it, because really it just comes down to winning the Small Council, or winning the houses. So I can see wars and things breaking out. Even you could potentially see a challenger before. You could see people defecting. You could see Dorne, especially Dorne in the Iron Islands, right off the bat trying to defect. And what does Bran do? So I don't think it'll be smooth sailing. I do think it is better, but again, it didn't change enough that in this world you can't foresee more wars and more battles and more fights over the king of the 6 kingdoms.
We cut to the north. Jon Snow, Ghost, and Tormund lead the wildlings out past the wall. IG Elizabeth Harvey from PA wants to know, do you think he's staying with the Night's Watch, or do you believe that he's going out to live with the wildlings in the true north.
Well, part of me is like, what is the point in the Night's Watch anymore anyway? Because they're there to protect the Seven Kingdoms against the wildlings, White Walkers, giants, things like that, right? That's what they're there for. Well, they now have a relationship with the wildlings. The White Walkers are all gone. There is no more Night King or anything else. So what is the Night's Watch supposed to do? So I think he's going up there to live. Maybe he comes back. Maybe he goes back and forth. Maybe he goes back down for Christmas back to Winterfell with his family. Any number of things can be happening. But if he's going to live up there, even if he is a man of the Night's Watch, I think he's going to be more like his Uncle Benjen and be a ranger and just be north of the wall all the time and have relationships with people up there so he can live fairly comfortably for a place that is snowed over 90% of the time. Not completely, because we see some plants starting to sprout through, which is the dream of spring coming to life, which I thought, again, beautiful shots. They really told a very visual story this week that was really, really well done.
We also thought all of the Dothraki and most of the Unsullied were dead too. We don't know if they actually sent everyone they had down. We don't know if technically all of them were killed.
Well, my point is you watched them all fall from the death of the Night King. So it's kind of that whole vampire mentality. You kill the top one and everybody underneath him falls. I'm just saying, based upon that, because everybody that was there was no stragglers that could have belonged to another Night King. They're not people in that aspect.
I think this was supposed to be timelined for 400 AD, something like that. The grand scheme of things, if you're looking at a globe and this is just like a small piece, like there's still 80% of a planet in their world that is left to be discovered. There's so much out there. Maybe it's a new enemy. It's kind of like any comic book you've ever picked up. Once they defeat one, and a new arch enemy, a nemesis, happens to spawn up.
Well, maybe they need to get a spray tan and a comb over for old Bran the Broken so that they can build a southern wall this time.
Sansa becomes queen in the closing montage. Arya heads out on her adventure in a Stark ship. Ghost finally gets petted and gets to run along Jon as he takes the wildlings home. Kim, your thoughts on the final scene, the episode, and your rating?
I already said what I kind of felt like with Arya and her just kind of sailing off into the sunset for whatever adventure is going to come next. I think that she alluded to that back in season 6 or something when she asked, what is west of Westeros? What is out there? She's always kind of been curious. I think for Jon, him heading back north and reuniting with Tormund and Ghost, I think that was appropriate. I think it was fitting. For Sansa, what I noticed was, she's always worn very colorful gowns in the past. Not necessarily bright and cheery, but, more kind of happier tones. And this particular one that she was wearing in that closing sequence was dark. It was gray, and it had the leaves on it, like, the tree from where she's from. And think about the braids that Daenerys would do, and they just kept getting more elaborate. Like every victory that she would win, her braid would get bigger and more elaborate. Every sequence, like when all the Stark kids are meeting together for that last time and they're saying their goodbyes, she has a very elaborate braid done. But then when she puts the crown on, her hair is completely down. And I thought there was some symbolism to that. All in all, there were some things about the episode that I just, even after watching it a couple of times and even after, listening to everything, all the yays and the nays online, and the poll that I did, I think was 31% people liked it and 60 some odd percent said nay. For me, it was a 6. I think that there was some really good aspects to it. I just didn't feel like it tied everything down the way that this much of a fan investment should have done. I don't think that they really did it full justice.
If you hated the season, you're going to hate this episode. I think if you love the season, you're going to love this episode. I think just in general, like the battle lines seem to have been drawn, and I'm amazed just on social media seeing just how many people just with venom for this episode. And it's like, hey, it wasn't wasn't that bad. And, I think it could have been a lot worse. The Double Ds had a difficult task. They had to address and close the kind of Mad Queen storyline in one episode while also closing the show in a way that was kind of satisfying narratively, while doing justice to everything that came before it. And look, they created this problem. They backed themselves into a corner. We all agree that this season could have benefited from a few more episodes, but regardless, they took on this task, and I think they did a great job. They split it into two parts. As I said earlier, part one addresses the Mad Queen, and part two addresses the aftermath. I love how they approached part one within their kind of self-imposed constraints. It was haunting. It was immersive. You could feel Jon and Tyrion's shock, their anguish, their pain. Emilia Clarke was mesmerizing and capped off what should be an Emmy award-winning performance. I mean, the speech in Valerian and Dothraki was terrifying and echoed, things that we've seen in the real world. I think it was one of the best decisions they made, especially for this character, and to be cemented, her turn. The scene with Jon was easily the most believable between the two, and the first time where I really felt the chemistry. His acting was amazing as well, and I think there was genuine emotion, and you could see she was fully delusional and had gone off the deep end. Drogon really, brought out the feels. Plus, just in general, this portion of the episode had some amazing visuals. The shot of her with the dragon wings was incredible. That shot where Drogon's kind of hidden in the ash or snow or whatever it was and comes out was amazing. The shot, there's just so many amazing shots in this episode. The Double Ds directed it, and I give them a lot of credit because we thought Miguel Sapochnik was the one to do the really visually stunning episodes, but they really got this one. And I think again this half of the episode in a vacuum is one of the most impressive things I've seen on the show. Part two for me, which is really the aftermath, doesn't work quite as well, but it's still satisfying. It's contrived, but look, after 8 years of tension, I was okay with a little bit of the levity. Crowning Bran, I think, made sense. Again, the scene was rushed. Some of the humor worked, some didn't, but it is what it is. I found that throughout this part of the show, I was smiling and I was laughing at the jokes, and I just kind of had let my guard down a little bit for the first time maybe ever on the show. And the scene of Brienne finishing Jaime's story really brought the feels. That was one of the, that really meant something. It was kind of a callback, closed his arc and closed her arc with him, and her being, the captain of the King's Guard or the commander of the King's Guard. It was just an amazing and fitting end for her. I like that Sansa kind of made the North independent and got her queenship, and I like Arya. Like, Arya has always been a traveler. She's always been somebody who's on an adventure, and I think for her to have gone back to Gendry or to settle down as a lady or even to be like, some vigilante would not have done her justice. I like that she's just off to see the world, and maybe she's successful, maybe she's not, but she's going to do it. That to me is a fitting end for a character. Look, I think this is a satisfying end to the show. It was not the greatest thing ever. It wasn't the greatest episode ever, but it wasn't the worst. I think for me, it's a solid 8.5. I had some of the best mood and visuals we've ever seen on the show, and again, it was satisfying. It doesn't ruin the show, and I think in a year or two, I think people will begin to come around on this season. Again, it wasn't perfect, it was rushed, but there was a lot of great stuff, and I don't know what turned people around against the show so much, but I really think it capped things off well. We'll get the books, and maybe that will add some more context, and people will relax a little bit. But again, I give this episode an 8.5.
Well, I'm not holding my breath for any books, but this episode was a fitting end. I've been around for too many show finales where I've seen some really disappointing ends to shows, Sopranos. But this really kind of tied up most of the loose ends. Are there still some things that I'd like answers to? Absolutely. But why? Does everything have to be answered 100% of the time? No. This really answered the big questions. It took care of most of the major storylines, and I don't have to like the way they went with it for it to be the way it was going to go anyway. I didn't like the Red Wedding because it was a punch in the gut. I didn't like them killing Ned Stark at the end of season 1. But all those things happened and I kept watching. So not liking that they picked Bran doesn't mean Bran isn't the right choice. If they were going to do another 15 seasons of this, he might prove us all wrong. But this is what we get. This is Game of Thrones. And who's going to sit on the Iron Throne? Apparently nobody, because they burned it down. So we have a whole new system going on, and that's fine. I think a lot of people want to equate this to our world, and it's not. It's a fantasy. So take the fantasy, suspend disbelief for an hour every Sunday, and watch the show and enjoy yourself. I, for one, really enjoyed this episode. I think of all the episodes of Game of Thrones, all 73 episodes, this was the most beautiful episode as far as cinematography, staging, and just how they presented everything. I don't think there's another one that can really even get close to how this one looked. The acting in it was just superb. Was the writing a little under? Maybe, but the writing's been under for 2 seasons because we're past George Martin's writing, so they have to come up with their own. That being said, I couldn't have asked for more. I'm so happy with Game of Thrones. I'm glad I invested 9 years in this. It was really fun. My only sadness is that I got to wait and hope that we get something else with the supposed spinoffs that we're getting. But I'm really glad we had this, and there was nothing better on, really, for the last 9 years. So I'm going to give this one a 9.5. I really enjoyed it.
I saw things like worst finale ever. This sucked. I hated it. I didn't really understand it. And if we do get the books and they mirror exactly what happened in the finale of the show, would people be less angry? Or would they be less snarky about the way things went? I wasn't crazy about Bran as a choice, but I'm a big picture guy, and I was looking down the road past the finale at, would this guy make a good king? Would people follow him? But I guess that really doesn't matter because they tell you who to follow and you just follow. Oddly enough, it's kind of like what we have going on now. But as the internet burned last night, much like King's Landing was, I thought to myself, I'm oddly okay with this because every character is where they wanted to be, if you really look at the grand scheme of things. And I liked that some of my favorites were now in the position to make the world a better place. I could even say that I liked it a lot. We tied everything up. We left Westeros in a much better place than we found it. Give me Davos over Littlefinger any day of the week. My choice wouldn't have been Bran, but I'm a viewer, not a writer, not a studio executive, not anybody of importance. So my choice simply doesn't matter, nor does it take away from the greatness of the show. And I won't bore you with my theories about how fandoms as a whole have become toxic, or snarky memes are just ruining the way we enjoy TV, or how people determine from a meme that a show just sucks. It was the journey. It was the last 8 or 9 years. We've come such a long way and a long time with this show, and it still stood head and shoulders above everything else on the small screen. I'm going to give this episode a 9. It was a fitting goodbye, and I implore people, as a fan of this type of entertainment, we need more of it. So if you can tell a better story, please sit down and write it. Because folks, I'm going to be honest with you. With the end of Game of Thrones, the end of the Star Wars saga and Avengers as we know it, the Cinik Radio podcast is going to need content. And I love the listeners of the show, and I thank you for your continued support. And if you can do a better job than the Double Ds, by all means, go and do it, and we will review the shit out of it. I give the Iron Throne a 6, just on visuals alone, but the fact that the Starks are in key positions in Westeros going forward after losing so much in the beginning of this great story bumps it all the way up to a 9 for me.
And that's it for this episode of the Cinik Radio podcast. I'm Igrihe. We had a great time bringing you this week's show. Please send all your comments, questions, concerns, and any crazy news stories from your neck of the woods to CINIKRadio@gmail.com. Find us on the internet at CINIKRadio.com. Look for us on Facebook at Facebook.com/CINIKRadio. And find us on Twitter at Cinik Radio. Continue to like, listen, subscribe, and share this with all your friends and family. And until next time, don't get captured.
Follow the podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and at CINIKRadio.com. Available for download on iTunes.